I'm the last survivor of the Holocaust in our family.
Behind the words, pictures, and artifacts in the museum are people whose stories of survival and hope come alive to inspire new generations of upstanders. One by one, these stories stir the soul.
Can there really be hope for us?
Mine is 4018. My sister was 4017.
Holocaust survivors, their descendants, liberators, champions of justice, and courageous upstanders ask only this: hear my story, so that the lessons they teach will echo for generations.
I will never meet someone else like my father. But there are many of us who, if we come together, can keep his voice alive.
These stories will change you. They will move you to action, inspiring the best of humanity every day.
I'm Trinity Johnson. In this episode, you'll meet Conrad Weiner. Conrad was born in 1938. When he was 3.5 years old, his life was upended by war. In 1941, he and many other Jews were deported to a subcamp of Auschwitz called Budy. Enduring 4 years of life in a concentration camp, Conrad's story is one of resilience, a mother's love, and also the importance of educating people to fight indifference. Conrad, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always such an honor to be with you in the same room, but so much more hearing your story. You're such an inspiration, and I cannot wait to get into your humor today and also maybe some of the stories that I haven't even heard, because there's always something new when I talk to you.
You have the questions.
True.
I'm very honored to be doing this, and it's nice to be with you.
Oh, thank you. To get us started, can you tell me where you're from and what was your family's life like before the war?
I'm from a small town. I was born in a small town called Storojinetz. At that time, it was part of Romania. It's now part of the Soviet Union. And it was a rural area, and my parents were pretty much happy at that time, except from time to time they had the programs to make sure that we remember that we are Jewish and not wanted. But other than that, the living conditions was pretty decent. They all had to manage to work. Neighbors were pretty good helping each other. That, of course, changed when the war started.
And one question before we get into how things changed, how observant was your family?
At that time, they were all very religious. Not ultra-Orthodox, but quite Orthodox. They observed all the holidays, and they kept kosher. And it was a lot more difficult to keep kosher at that time than it is today, with refrigerations and all the good things.
So you already alluded to things obviously changing with the war. Can you walk us through how life did start changing? How did it change for you and your family?
Well, keep in mind, I was only 3.5 years old. So what I share with you is what I know from my parents, shared with my relatives that already were in the States, and what I did is a lot of reading. So it started when the Soviet Union gave the Romanian king an ultimatum that to remove his forces from Moldova. They had a lot of Russian citizens in Moldova. They were so outnumbered that the king had no choice but to follow the ultimatum. He withdrew his troops. That's when the Russian army came in. And on the way to Moldova, they took over our community, Storojinetz. They confiscated private property, everything became state-owned. And we thought that's going to be a lot better because allegedly they treat everybody equally. Well, they didn't. We were persecuted as being Jewish, and later on, when Romania joined the Nazi alliance, it was held against us. We were considered to be communists. So not only were we Jewish, we were also communists, and we were absolutely undesirable in Romania.
One of the stories I've always heard you tell is when your family was rounded up and put on a cattle car. At some point, your uncle essentially saves your life by carrying you. Can you share that part of the story?
Yes, he did. Before that, we had a very tragic situation. We were told to pack whatever we can carry and wait outside to be transported. We didn't know where. We didn't really leave the house for more than a few minutes when our good neighbors started to steal whatever they could from the house that we abandoned. I had an aunt that was visiting from Palestine at that time. My grandmother was old and tired, so they suggested go and sit down and rest. When the convoy moves, we joined them. Well, unbeknown to them, the officers were ordered to check the house, make sure nobody's hiding. They found my aunt and my grandmother. They brought them outside, shot them on the spot, just to make sure that people are not trying to hide. We were taken to a school that they had like a collection center. Were crowded conditions, very unpopular. From there we were taken to the train station. And in a sense we were lucky because other groups were taken to the river, lined up, machine gun, thrown into the water. We were packed into cattle cars, 120 people per car. And when the car stopped, the journey lasted 2 days and 1 night. When the car finally stopped, the old people and the very young, some perished in transit. They opened the door to the car. People were jumping out, begging for water. It's a lot easier to get along without food than without water. So the Romanian gendarmes were emptying buckets of water. People were gathering up anything they could just to get their lips wet. From there, our journey started into an artificially named area, Transnistria, meaning over the Dniester River, into the Ukraine. It was late fall, early winter, mud, snow, and if you cannot keep up with the convoy, you were shot, left on the side of the road. My uncle, who was a big, strong guy, was carrying me, and when my cousin, who was 4 years older than I am, when he got tired, he would let me walk a little bit and carry him. And this is how we managed to keep up with the convoy and not be killed.
What was your uncle's name?
Oscar
Oscar.
Pauker.
And so at this time, you were still with your mother, your uncle Oscar, and your cousin. Anyone else
My
from
aunt,
your family?
my aunt, my mother's sister, Eva.
What about your father?
My father was killed during the war. When Russia took over our neighborhood, our community, they took all the men of military age into their army. With little or no training, put them on the front line. So I was only 3.5. I really don't even remember my father, other than for some pictures. We found out that he was killed.
And so you always share about your uncle Oscar and how he saved your life and he was strong and he carried you. But there's also another really moving part of your story where your mother, too, saves your life. And I'm hoping you can share that incredible story of strength.
Yes.
And tell us about her a little bit.
Well, I really don't particularly like to call myself a survivor, because I'm really a child that survived because of my mother's efforts. We were finally arrived to Ukraine, and our living conditions would look, Motel 6 looked like a spa room. We were sleeping, living in barns where the animals were taken by the Russian army as they went through the Ukraine. And I was very sick, couldn't keep any food down. At the risk of her own life, after people told my mother, just let the poor child die in peace, don't torture him, she climbed a cherry tree in the spring. Anything on the low level was already taken. She climbed up to take twigs and little branches to make tea for me that eventually helped me regain strength. And in fact, she not only gave me birth, she helped me survive. She had to get off that tree real quick. We didn't know if it was within the limits of the camp or not. So she injured her leg, had a scratch, a cut that got infected. And we didn't have medication. So for the rest of her life, she had a big scar there. It's a reminder of her effort to save me.
Wow, that's amazing.
It wasn't easy.
What was her name?
My mother's name was Adela.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And so you were in this labor camp for about 4 years.
Yes.
And families were together. However, people within the camp, I've heard you tell stories about, they tried to shield the children as much as possible or come up with things to distract. Can you talk about some of those memories or what some of those stories are?
Well, first of all, the winter from 41 to 42 was extremely harsh. A lot of people died, leaving orphans. So they took one of the stalls, converted it to an orphanage. It's a obligation to take care of widows and orphans in our religion. To keep the children's minds away from what's going on, they created a children's choir. My stepfather's brother-in-law was a cantor, and he created this choir to have the children sing. We didn't have toys, of course. We made shift whatever that we could. I remember finding a small door. My cousin and I used it as a sled to go into the craters created by the bombs. I remember one occasion, Nazi soldiers came to investigate the camp. They gave me a piece of chocolate. It's like giving you a piece of gold. I had to wait for my mother to come home from work to divide it exactly in half for my cousin and myself. She had to throw it away because it could have been poisoned. So another thing that they did for the children, at the beginning I mentioned that to pack whatever we can carry, education was so important. Some people brought books. And the old people that could not work in the forest, forced by the Nazis, or work on the field for the Ukrainian women, were our teachers. I remember writing with a pencil so small, it's like writing with my fingers. But we had to be educated. It was very important.
And we'll definitely get into some of the love of learning that I know you've had throughout your life. But let's go to the end of the war and when you were liberated. How did that come about?
Well, it came about as a surprise because they had very little communication with the outside world. Some young people, partisan, came to the camp. You're free to go. The war is over. It's over. We were afraid to move. We saw that Nazi soldiers and Romanian gendarmes were leaving really fast. So we knew that something is going on. But a day or two later, the Russian army came in and liberated us. And that's when we realized that the war is over. They gave us food. Some people were dying to have a cigarette, so they gave us that. And we were free to go. Go where? Russia didn't want us. Germany didn't want us. So we walked from town to town, gaining strength, while the international community decided what to do with us. Eventually, it was decided that we should be repatriated, returned to the country of origin. And this is how we wound up going back to Romania. And all this was done by walking, one little town to another. So we came to Romania, and shortly thereafter, in America, you say we went from the frying pan into the fire because Romania became a communist country, became part of the Soviet Empire. Although anti-Semitism was still alive, it was more covert. And we no longer had to wear the Star of David or being stopped in the street, asked for ID, and being beaten up because our IDs were stamped with the word Jew. But still, life was not very easy, but it was an improvement over what we had.
And I know I've heard this story many times, but for those watching, can you tell me about the day you found out that you were able to come to America?
That just shows you how they try to give you the extra twist. I was working, couldn't go to college because they had no interest in educating me. They knew that I would try to leave. So I found a job in a clock factory. And I started at the bottom level. Prototype was built. Worked my way up to supervisory position, which was unusual for a Jew. One day, the director of the company, the nicest person you ever want to meet, calls me to his office. It's very unusual. I get in there. To his right was the secretary of the Communist Party for our factory. On his left was somebody from the Secret Service. You could recognize him a mile away. And this nice, sweet gentleman starts to call me every name in the book. You're a traitor, you're dishonest, I don't know how you deceived me like this. Starting tomorrow, you sweep the floor of the factory. No, today, get out. 15, 20 minutes later, he calls me back, closes the door, throws his arms around me. He said, "You're lucky you're leaving for the United States." This is how we found out. It was a day or two later that we got the exit visa. We had an entrance visa to the United States for years and years because my mother had two sisters and an uncle that came here before the war. But Romania claimed that nobody wants to leave the country, so we couldn't get out. Till finally, the international community forced them to demonstrate that nobody wants to leave. So on our highest holiday, the Day of Atonement, they decided if you want to leave the country, come to the police station to register. We were afraid. So the rabbi said, we can pray later. If enough people show up, they cannot arrest everybody. Sure enough, they had lines 2 blocks around the police station. International community was photographing. So they had no choice but to start to let people leave. So of course they left the old people, the people that had no income first. But then eventually we found out that we can get an exit visa. And we found out through a very lucrative system, like in America it's called bargaining, or spinning a hand. In Romania it's called bakshish. You go to somebody, you shake hands, and you leave some money in it, and you get things done. We lived in a relatively small community, and word spread like wildfire. Did you hear about the family leaving for the United States? Is that true? Are they really leaving? And people that we didn't even know came to the train station when word got around when we were leaving to say goodbye to us. We were afraid to open our mouth till we got into Vienna, Austria, the first free country. Now my mother, my stepfather lived under freedom before, so they knew what it is, but to me it was totally unimaginable.
How old were you?
At that time, I was 22. Took 15 years to get out.
So to your point, what was that first feeling of freedom like? Do you remember?
It just was unusual. Not having tasted freedom before, I didn't know the difference. But I soon found out the people, my relatives in the United States, arranged for us to spend a few days in Vienna to get accustomed to freedom and to get accustomed to good food. So I saw that people are smiling on the street. Nobody was walking around the same clothes as the next person that you see. And then I had a very interesting experience. I was very interested in photography. I could not take a camera with me from Romania. So I had a little bit of money that my relatives left for us. So I saw a photo shop. So I went in to see if I can buy a camera. I speak the language, I spoke in German. And he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Well, we are in transit from Romania. We are going to the United States, and I would like to buy a camera. But I only have this amount of money." I showed him. He smiled. He said, "Well, that will buy a couple rolls of film. But wait a minute." He went to the back of the store, came out with a camera. He said, "Somebody didn't pick us up for 2 years, so I don't think they want it. You can have it." And that was an experience where we were taught and we knew that the Germans and the Austrians were very anti-Semitic. And here's that Austrian guy giving me a free camera.
How did that act of kindness change your outlook?
It just made me reaffirm my belief in humanity. Mm. I had good friends in Romania because I was very active in sports. So my immediate circle of friends in Romania was fine. I didn't feel the discrimination and the anti-Semitism. But to see that German guy, Austrian guy, give me a camera, that showed me they are good people in the world. There are good people in the world.
So let's fast forward a little bit. You're in transit to America. Yeah. Let's talk about arriving to America. What was that experience like, and what was it like rebuilding here in America? Where did you go?
Well, a brother of my aunt from my stepfather's side lived in Pittsburgh. And he was in a position to guarantee the government that we will not be a burden. So we came into New York Harbor. At that time, I spoke 7 languages, but I couldn't find words to express the feeling when you see the Statue of Liberty. Just absolutely beautiful. One of my cousins waited for us at the port. We were allowed to take out X amount of kilos. So instead of packing our little belongings in wooden crates, we packed them in a tent. So he struggled with that tent to pick it in his car, and he took it to my aunt's house in Brooklyn. Keep in mind, it's 1962. She looked at me and she said, "You need a haircut." I was a hippie before it was popular here. So she sent me across the street to get a haircut. Gave me $2. That included the tip. Took off a little bit too much. But this is how I got my first impression. And another aunt of mine in Brooklyn invited us for dinner. We usually have cantaloupe for dessert. And before dinner, she gave us cantaloupe. We looked at each other, we thought it's going to be dinner. That was one of the experiences.
Was it hard adapting to life in America?
It's very easy to adapt to better things. Very easy. And I was very fortunate. I came to Pittsburgh in November of '62 when the Pirates won the World Series for the first time in I don't know how many years. People were jumping for happiness. I was waiting for a streetcar to go to my language class. And Some girls jumped out of the cars, hugged me. We won, we won, we won. So I thought to myself, hey, that's the place to be, you know. And I was very fortunate that I learned English quickly because a lot of the English words are German root. And after 1 year, Uncle Sam decided to take me into the army. So of all the places that they could station me, they sent me to Germany. It sounds terrible, but it was a wonderful experience. I did not believe that all of them could be brainwashed. And I was right. I formed some wonderful friendships. One of my friend's mother lived across the street from our barracks. Anytime they didn't like lunch or dinner, I used to call her up. Grandma, I don't like my lunch or my dinner. Oh, come over, come over. I always have something for you. My other friend, who even looked alike, Kurt Rauscher, he was a salesman for a flour company. And all the bakeries that he was serving had these tremendous Christmas parties. He arranged for my company commander to get time off. He took me to these parties with him. Food and booze were flowing, no end, and introduced me as his brother. Knew full well that I'm Jewish. I never hide that. So that was a good learning experience.
Wow. So you said that you relatively had an easy time adapting to life in America. What about your mother and stepfather?
Well, it was a little more difficult for them because for older people it's harder to learn the language. However, my stepfather was a finishing carpenter, which is very sought after trade in the United States. So you have the tools, you know how to use them. You don't have to speak very long. My mother went to Indianapolis, and she worked for my uncle who had a bakery there. So it made it easier for her. Eventually, she learned the language well enough to become a sales lady here in Cincinnati.
Is that what brought you to Cincinnati?
Well, not really. When I was in the Army, my parents separated. They got divorced. My stepfather stayed in Pittsburgh. My mother went to Indianapolis. I tried not to take sides. So my aunt in Cincinnati arranged for me to have a job interview. And this is how I wound up in Cincinnati. But a more underground reason is that my wife's prayers were answered. This is how we met on a blind date.
You met Cindy here in Cincinnati on a blind date. Wow. Who introduced you? What was that like?
Well, my aunt was very concerned. I worked in Hamilton before the expressway was built, and I used to come home very late. I worked till 9 o'clock. If I wasn't home by 10, she called my mother in Indianapolis. What can I do? So my aunt decided that I'm supposed to meet a girl in Cincinnati, not to hang out in Hamilton so much. So she arranged for my cousin's girlfriend to introduce me to her best girlfriend, which is Cindy. All they told me that Cindy lives across the street from Rena. So I come across the street from Rena. There was a middle with two doors, on the two houses. I decided to go to the right side. I ring the bell. I tell him I'm here to see Cindy. The man looks at me and said, well, I have a daughter named Cindy, but she's only 2 years old. You probably mean Cindy next door. So this is how we met. And on the first date, the restaurant closed before we left. Had that much to talk together. She was a history major. It's like walking out of a history book. And after a while, when we started dating seriously, I was self-conscious. I felt inferior. She has a college degree, and I only have a high school education. So we went to the UC library, we looked at the catalogs, found out that Georgetown University in Washington and Indiana University will give you unlimited credits if you take a test and skip certain grades. So I arranged for my employer, after I was admitted to Indiana, to have me transferred to Bloomington to establish residency. And this is how I got to Bloomington, and I went to college there.
And you got your degree?
Well, I got my degree in 2 years because with my knowledge of language, they didn't have enough courses for me to do it. So I finished in 2 years. And Indiana University was so generous with their grades that University of Cincinnati gave me a full scholarship to their Master of Business program. So this is how I settled in Cincinnati.
So 2 questions. How many languages do you speak? And how long have you and Cindy been married now?
Oh boy. At this time, I only fluent with 4 languages. I forgot my French and I forgot Hungarian. And I've been married to Cindy, or like I like to say, I've been in training by her for over 60 years.
It's amazing.
And when she's not here or present, I point out that you get less than that for murder. But it wasn't quite that bad.
Oh.
One of my cousins, a lawyer, advised us never to go to bed angry with each other. It was a good advice. We had some sleepless nights, but we didn't go to bed angry.
Well, and I love hearing, because education was something you valued
Yes.
all of your life, that you two connected over that. And also some of why you started sharing your experience during the Holocaust also came out of education. You were working as a substitute teacher.
Yes.
Can you share what prompted you to start sharing your story while you were substituting?
Well, I retired early because my wife was still teaching. And after the first 2 weeks, I cut up on my reading and my sleep. So I couldn't play golf every day. My golf buddies were still working. So I applied to become a substitute teacher. My paperwork was completed on a Wednesday, I remember exactly. On the next Monday, I got a call from the Academy of World Languages. Sounds impressive. They hired me because I speak Russian and German. Unfortunately, that school went down the tube. Eventually, I was there for 7 years as a building substitute, meaning I come to the building every day. If they need me in a classroom, I substitute. If they don't need me, I do office work. So after a while, I became more valuable in the office than as a substitute because of discipline problems. So I decided that if I want to work in an office, I would have been better off where I was. And I applied to Walnut Hills because one of the former 5 principals that I had at the Academy of World Languages was assistant principal of Walnut Hills. So she hired me right away. And one of the classes was World War II. And one of the students remembered that I'm from Europe. So he asked me, Mr. W., Weiner and Weiner, they get confused, so I use my Board of Education whenever they call me Weiner. But I told him, yes, I knew you. Did you meet Hitler? So after I collected myself, I explained to him that Europe is a rather large continent, and Hitler and my parents traveled in different social circles without batting an eye. He said, what did you do during the war? I said, I was in a concentration camp. And he said, what were you concentrating on? The rest of the class busted out laughing. But he had no clue. And this is Walnut Hills in 1996. That's when it was still one of the best schools in the country, preparing our leaders. They're that ignorant. And your former boss, Sarah, called me for I don't know how many times. I finally decided that it's time to share my story. Compared to what other people went through, because I was so young, I didn't think it's worth doing it. But after that experience, I didn't stop sharing my experience. It's been about 15 years now.
And I'm so very happy that you're so willing to share this story with, again, one person up to thousands of people every year.
It's very important.
And educating people on the importance of remembering the dangers of indifference. I know that's a major theme that comes through from your presentations.
Elie Wiesel, may rest in peace. Put it a nice way. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. Yes. And that's what happened. During the war, there was a very popular song. One of the lines is, the village is burning and you're standing with folded arms. It's in Yiddish. It was a translation. So whenever I have an audience, I finish with that. Ask them not to stand with folded arms when the world is burning. Anti-Semitism is raising its ugly head again. We cannot stand by.
Well, Conrad, thank you so much for sharing your story and inspiring each of us to not accept indifference. And thank you so much for being with me today and sharing your story. It's always an honor.
It was a pleasure. Cut.
To make sure you don't miss an episode, subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Let us know your thoughts on this episode. Our email is in the show notes. You can also connect with us on Instagram and TikTok at Holocaust and Humanity, and X and Facebook at CincyHHC. Hear My Story is a production of the Nancy and David Wolf Holocaust and Humanity Center. The center's mission is to ensure that the lessons of the Holocaust inspire action today. This series is part of the Cynthia and Harold Gutman Family Center for Storytelling and is generously supported by Margaret and Michael Valentine. Visit us in person at Historic Union Terminal in Cincinnati, Ohio, or online at holocaustandhumanity.org. Managing producer is Ann Thompson. Consulting producer is Joyce Kamen. Technical producer is Robert Mills. Technical director is Josh Emerson. Select music is by Kik Lee. This is recorded at the Nancy and David Wolf Holocaust and Humanities Center in Cincinnati, Ohio.